Yeah, but begin. Allô? Hello. Ah, c'est bon. Celui-là est bon. Ibrahim, okay. Okay. So for the last panel, it's a policy panel. I think we have a French translation. So we have the former Minister of Budget, Ibrahim Sarr. We have also Amanda van Dyke, who is the founder of Critical Minerals. Thomas Melonio will be online. He's a chief economist of the French Agence for Development. Carlo Rossotto from the International Finance Corporation, World Bank, is here. And Gisela Granado, policy director of the Extractive EITI initiative, will be also online. So the topic of this panel is tax policy, industrial policy for critical minerals. Maybe we will begin first by industrial policy. I will give the mic to the ministry, to the minister.
Je parle en français ou en anglais? In English. Thanks a lot, Grégoire. First of all, I don't know if I have not lost my English. Just a few words about what I'm doing here, and also my previous experience. I would like to thank Mr. Patrick Guillemot, the professor Patrick Guillemot and Sylviane Guillemot, to give me the opportunity to come here in Clermont, where I was a student. It was a long time ago. Professor Paul Collier, you don't know me, but I was also your student. Because thanks to you, I spent 6 months in the Center of the Study of African Economy. And Chris Adams was my supervisor. I learned economics in Oxford. And thanks to you guys, my 2 kids were students also in Oxford. I tried to travel to Oxford just to meet you. I was in the same group with Dambi Samayo, Anke Offler, and Karin Kimberg. And my experiences in Oxford were very interesting because I was working on the interrelation between fiscal variable and growth. Later, I became, thanks to your inputs, guys, I became Minister of Budget and also later Minister of Energy in my country, Senegal. I really appreciate what you have done for me and also my country. And CERDI also, it's a very important. I'm going to give you one information. I had problem with visa. And I asked the minister in charge of the presidency to give me a diplomatic passport. The main reason was I'm going to attend a conference here in Clermont. I was surprised to know that they know what is CERDI. And the new president of Senegal, young new president, gave me 3 years for my passport just because I was coming here. It means that we know what, and one of the things, I have shared the links of the conference with the Minister of Mine in Senegal, you don't know it, and also with all the civil servants who are working in Senegal. I would say, just for the introduction, I'm also the member of the board of the CERDI alumni, as a former student here. I hope that they are following the conference. I'm here as a managing director of Mr. Patrick Guillemot, make the presentation this morning. I am the managing director of the major phosphate company of West Africa called Somiva. Thanks to the professor here in Oxford, we have developed this company to make it a major company in West Africa. And I'm here to talk as a general manager. I do appreciate what I have learned here since this morning. But my view is different. We see things differently. The first question I would like to raise is about what is critical mineral. As a general manager, it does not mean the same for me, because critical mineral, in my point of view, it is necessarily something that we have to consider in the context. Critical mineral is that, I would say that it is not it can't be considered like a general concept, no. It depends on the country, it depends on the community, it depends, I would say it is dynamic. It is something that's changed, I would say, permanently. For instance, for me, in my country, low-developed country, we have agricultural difficulties, we have social difficulties, we have food difficulties. For me, critical means something that allows the country to satisfy, to give some response to what is the basic needs of the countries. It is very important, because when you talk about critical minerals, it does not have the same meaning for me and you. This is the first thing. The second thing is, every mining company is different from the others. Every mining company is different from the others. What does it mean? First of all, there is not a company isolated. There is an ecosystem of enterprise. So when you talk about a mining company, it is an ecosystem. Someone talked about cost structure. The first thing I have made when I was appointed to this position is to do the analysis. You know, we know how to do it, because thanks to CERDI. And I have analyzed the cost structures. The first thing I have, the first conclusion is, when you analyze the cost structure, sometimes the mining company is not a mining company. I'm going to explain what that means. My company, when you, in French we say decomposition. When you analyze the cost structure, you will realize that more than 50% of the cost is coming from the logistic company. So you have the revenue, you have the expense of the revenue. When you analyze the expense of revenue, someone told about the cost structure. Most of the mining companies if you analyze the power market, they are not mining companies. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Most of the company you consider mining company, they are not mining companies. Because when you analyze the cost structure, the power market is not a power market of a mining company. It is very important when you make what you when you do in your analysis. And the other things I would like to talk about, it is when you manage a mining company, someone talks about taxes. I would like to say something which is very important. As a general manager of a mining company, the legal license is important. What is much more important, it is the social impact. You know why? Because if you want to have an impact, we were talking about the critical material. We must consider that if you want, as a country, I'm coming from a low developed country, I'm coming from Senegal, West Africa. What is important in our view? It is the social impact. If you don't consider the social impact, we're going to miss something. We also need to, you are academics, we also need to talk about infrastructure, energy. And one thing I would like to insist is I would like to raise an expectation from our sides. What we need from the academics is to help the companies to do the analysis on the social impact. One more question which is important about critical minerals. It is the mapping. Someone talked about this morning. As a general manager, I used to discuss with the Minister of Mining. What he has discovered, find in the ministry, is the mapping was so weak that any civil servant could have the information from his size different from what the others have. It is very important to know that. That's why we think that as manager of companies and also policy makers, that the academics need to check this opportunity to give the support to the countries and the companies so that the mapping, we call it in French, cadastre minier. I don't know the English for that. This is very, very important. Why? We have something very specific in Africa. I don't know if you know the BRGM. BRGM was a bureau in charge of research. They have done a very huge research on Africa, especially in Francophone Africa. Do you know why it is important? If you talk about mapping, most of the jobs they have done can be used by the countries to develop the critical material. And also, there is something that is not known. It is the archive of the colonies. I used to say that when you talk about mine in Africa, the first thing you have to do is to look at the archives. Because the archive of RF, the West African country has so many information, and no one considers that. You know why I'm talking about that? Because when I was appointed to the position, the first thing I have done is to go to look at the archive. And when you see the archive, you can see that those, I don't know how they did have so much information. The archive are so rich, and no one uses it. We call it in French les archives de l'Afrique de l'Est. The problem we have to solve is that most of the archive is in France, near Nantes. They are in Nantes. They are not in these countries. And when you look at the archive, these experts and geologists could give, in the modern term, I would say, certification of the reserve. They have done so many important jobs that if you use it, you know why am I talking about it? Because in the next few years, these critical materials are going to be some political dilemma about our country. I just wanted to share with you some pieces in French pieces that we have to explore, because they have done very good job. One final question is about the artisanal exploitation of the mining. We are doing something very innovative, the new government of Senegal. It is important to know that when you talk about artisanal, sometimes it is not just for natives of the country. Because on the artisanal level, sometimes they're coming from the other countries. It is very important to know it. For instance, in the southern eastern part of Senegal, those who are in the artisanal, they're coming from Ghana. They're coming from Mali. They're coming from Guinea. Why it is important? And also they're trying to export the gold mine. It is important to know that what we're trying to do in Senegal is to not kill this artisanal, but to transform it and to modernize. I explained to the Minister of Mining that the potential job in the artisanals, it is 30,000 jobs, but we need to use something it is difficult to have. Just in French, we call it fonds revolving, something that can make, you can put some billions so that they can finance their activity. It is important. Microfinance, yes. And it is very important for us. One final question is about security. As a general manager, security does not mean the same from your side to our side. A mine sometimes is very remote. And also, when you come in these places, you normally have to hide from the population, the local population. It is difficult. There is a natural opposition between the company and the local community. You have to hide them, but keep in mind that even though they work in the company, they're in opposition with the company. So it means that when you talk about security, the security is coming from the communities, and also it is in the company. Why it is important is you have to manage, to discuss, to have dialogue, and so. The other security problem, it is about, I have tried to share with you my vision of ecosystem of a mining company. Please keep in mind that the mining company is not a company on its single. No. So it means that security involves all this ecosystem. When I say security, for instance, in Somiva, the logistic company, the transport company, can use 400 trucks when the activity is on the highest level. So if you consider that, you have also to keep in mind that security means that you are responsible for everyone in this ecosystem. It is very important. The other thing, my final word, it is we have some problem with what is happening in the next countries, Mali. It's complicated. We're using the Secret Service to have some information. It's, in my view, something is going to happen in this part of Africa. I don't know. So it means that the best way to manage security for a critical mineral is the cooperation. It must be transnational. It means that it is the company, the local community, the central government, and the other countries. So we're trying to, but the information we are having, it is risky. We don't know what is happening in the next few years. Bon, what we don't know. And also, one other thing, we need the technology, the best technology available. I would like to talk about the satellite or some. And otherwise, I think they're going to have to face some very complicated problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Monsieur le Ministre. I'm sorry, I completely forgot to introduce also Professor Sumata, Claude Sumata, who is the Dean of the Université Pédagogique Nationale of the DRC, Démocratique République of Congo. Sorry. So, Carlo, do you want to present something? Yeah?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I wanted to thank you and to thank FERDI and Raba in particular for this kind invitation. I'm Carlo Rossotto, and I lead telecom media technology upstream at the IFC, part of the World Bank Group. And I think on screen there will be a short presentation, but that's not mine. I think that's yours. It's okay. So, excellent. So when we discussed 2-3 weeks ago about attending this conference, Rab and I discussed a possible framework to look at the impact, to assess the impact of artificial intelligence on critical materials. And I thought that was a very, very interesting question and not an easy one to tackle. And that to try to have a framework, try to start to have a framework to address this question, it was important to look at artificial intelligence not only as a new technology that is affecting, for example, the way materials are being extracted or the way materials are being transformed, but really to go to the core of the artificial intelligence infrastructure and the main components, and looking at the main components, critical materials, that is alert de sécurité. There is like, okay, perfect, I see it here. Should be able to see it on screen. So basically, from there, the idea of a simple cartography, basically a simple tool that would help us to look at the impact or the relevance of single materials on the main components of the artificial intelligence infrastructure. So to do so, I have to learn how to point. Slides. If somebody can go to the next slide, that would help. Yeah. Could you move to the next slide? Yeah. Okay, just to start describing a bit the model, is to look at critical materials as one of the 4 systems that compose the artificial intelligence infrastructure. And in particular also to abandon the view that this is a well-orchestrated value chain. Yeah, there we are. Well-orchestrated value chain, but to think about all of these different components as different systems in the artificial intelligence infrastructure. So we start with materials, and materials can be seen as composed of 3 phases: upstream, transformation, and delivery of materials. And then in the middle you have semiconductors. You have on top IP core, EDA, and design, and these are the areas that have the highest value in the artificial intelligence infrastructure. A company like IRM is IP core. The EDA phase, the electronic design automation, is a duopoly of 2 companies, Synopsys and Cadence. And then design is a company like NVIDIA, for example. So you can imagine a lot of this value in the industry is captured at this level. And then there is the process to basically build a semiconductor. So IP core, EDA, design, a company like NVIDIA is called a fabless semiconductor producer because it doesn't have fabrication facilities. Fabrication starts there in the middle, from wafer manufacturing, oxidation, photolithography, all the way down to packaging. A company like Siemens, for example, is considered an integrated design manufacturer because, Samsung goes from wafer manufacturing all the way to packaging. When the last 2 phases of electronic die sorting and packaging are outsourced to a third party, is called OSAT, Outsourced Semiconductor Assembly and Testing. So this is the process that goes through these different phases of production, testing, and delivery of semiconductors. You have on the next column, you have the products. And the first 5 in the industry, they are called logic. Logic are CPUs, GPUs, ASICs. They are the basic semiconductors that basically are grouped in servers and storage facilities in data service centers. The DRAM and HBM are memory semiconductors, and then you have other types of semiconductors like opto-discrete systems and security that basically form different types of components of the artificial intelligence infrastructure. Data centers, artificial intelligence is the third phase of growth of the data center industry. The first one was with the wholesalers, companies, real estate companies, basically, that would host the servers of companies. The second phase is the public cloud, with the growth of the multi-sided platforms like Google and Uber and so on. And artificial intelligence is a distinct third phase in the growth of data centers. Data centers for artificial intelligence are for training, these mega facilities, and inference to be closer to the final customer. Data centers are made of servers, storage, networking, as well ancillary services like energy and cooling. And on the last column, you have the stack of the LLM model. If you can go quickly to the next, oh, I can go myself to the next slide. So basically, per every critical material is possible to identify the specific phase in the process of building semiconductors, the specific products that are affected by that material, and where in the data center ecosystem this material is relevant. Here you're looking at silicon. Silicon is everywhere. So basically, it's really very core to the fabrication of semiconductors and to most types of semiconductors. But you take, for example, very quickly, a couple of other materials. This is gallium. Gallium is very important at the phase of wafer manufacturing and in the production of discrete and optoelectronic semiconductors. They are very important for artificial intelligence because artificial intelligence requires dense GPUs and communication, laser communication within the data center. So they're very important for networking and opco. And they are very important for the energy that supports the data centers of AI trading. So already gallium has a very specific role in the artificial intelligence infrastructure. This is hafnium, for example, that is very important in the oxidation stage. Artificial intelligence requires a new type of oxidation process that is based on specific materials. You have others. Here was germanium, for example, more important at mid-level of the production chain, and again, very important for networking and optoelectronics, so the communication within the data center, which is a new element of artificial intelligence training data centers. You have others like arsenic, very important in one phase, the ion implantation, as well as for servers and memory in this case, and the tantalum and the other groups for metal wiring. So basically, the idea is to have a mapping where each critical material corresponds to criticality in one or more phases of the industry. So let's go back. So basically, each material can then be mapped to the importance in the artificial intelligence infrastructure and how this infrastructure is changing driven by AI. So basically, larger chips, for example, very important development is the silicon-grade cooling. So basically, the silicon, which is an ancillary element of a data center, becomes embedded at chip level, and to do so, you need specific materials. So this is an analysis of the, and for time constraints, we cannot go into the details of all the materials that are relevant for a specific phase of semiconductor processing, and how AI is changing that phase. And here is the same for product and for data centers. In synthesis, coming out of this analysis, I think there are three major factors. And the first one is the group of critical materials that are gallium, germanium, and arsenic are critical for wafer fabrication, advanced devices, and for edge AI. They are also critical to next generation power. And in this case, China has a control of both upstream and transformation. Very difficult to substitute, but to the point that Kevin was discussing before, maybe there are other strategic behavior behind China's decision to put restriction at this level. Then you have the logic materials that are tantalum and tungsten. They are very interesting because, again, very important in wafer fabrication, interconnect, packaging. They would slow, a crisis at that level would slow down the development of artificial intelligence. But what is interesting is that specific companies would be affected: Intel, Samsung, and TSMC. So basically the strength of China at midstream level would affect specific companies in this value chain. And then the so-called system materials, which are the rare earth materials, they would impact rather the machines, so the lithography machines and the cooling systems. What all of these critical materials have in common, in addition to artificial intelligence infrastructure, is also defense. And in particular, radars in anti-aircraft systems, the modern ones that are designed to contrast drone loitering mission. They also get very hot. So like in a data center where the density of infrastructure increases the temperature, calling for new cooling systems to be embedded even at chip level. At the same time, radars are particularly sensitive, and GPUs, for example, GPUs of NVIDIA are kept at 80% capacity because of cooling restrictions. So basically, the sort of criticality of these materials for this phase also reverberates outside of the artificial intelligence infrastructure and into defense. Couple of other things, you saw this already, the domination of China at midstream level. So basically, and also those we have seen, we can look at the dominance of countries, if you look at the table on the left, by phase of semiconductor development. So the United States are very strong at the upstream phases, so companies like NVIDIA, so in IP, EDA, logic, and then memory as well as processing, mid-level processing is a strength in the United States. Korea is the dominant country when it comes to memory chips. In the equipment is United States, Japan, and the Netherlands that have a very strong position at this level. And the materials fabrication and the outsourcing, so the OSAT, are very much China and Taiwan. So that gives you, with the presence of South Korea as well. So that gives you already an idea of how the actual artificial intelligence infrastructure has a certain concentration in terms of countries, in terms of dependence of critical materials and industrial strength. Before I finish with policy implications, what could be the methods to assess the impact of criticalities at material level on the artificial intelligence infrastructure. There are quantitative methods from systems theory, the Forrester, the MIT groups, but I would like to try a different approach and to build an exchange-traded fund, as most of these companies are investable across this complex system of systems. I think that it would be interesting to create a mock exchange trade fund. There will be parts of the industry that are not investable, including the LLM stack and including part of the materials industry. So for those, one would need to approximate the performance, the stock market performance. But I think that most of these values, most of these companies are investable. So I think it would be interesting to create a financial model based on an exchange-traded fund that replicates the industry by the companies, the performance of the companies that compose this industry. Getting to policy implications, just to finish. So at trade, taxes, and industrial policy. At trade level, there are strategic material agreements, especially on critical materials with the key producers. There are talks of tariff reductions to diversify away from China at midstream level. It would be very important to have coordinated stockpile triggers for critical materials. I think it would be also interesting to have more transparency on the supply chain for AI hardware imports. At tax level, there could be accelerated, what the industry asks for is accelerated depreciation of AI fab equipment. We discussed before recycling incentives. In terms of industrial policy, many countries are looking at co-financing and having the state intervene in upgrading the midstream refining for critical materials. I think we're going towards multilateral and sovereign stockpiles for AI critical minerals, investment in R&D, and a lot of discussion of expanding the OSAT and the advanced packaging industry outside of Taiwan and the countries that are most affected. So I was a bit brief, but I'm leaving you this stack and the analysis behind. There is a bit more for those who are interested in a follow-up.
Thank you, Carlo. So, Amanda, do you want to react? It's easy.
So I'm probably one of the few non-academics in this room, and I come from the investment side, and I used to manage a critical minerals investment fund, and I now work with an industry group that aims to raise awareness of critical minerals. One of the issues here is that critical minerals represent what is on those, with a couple exceptions. If you consider critical minerals to be copper, which is now on the US critical mineral list, a strategic mineral, but even if you include copper, critical minerals represent less than 20% of the mineral products in the world. If you go down to, let's say, rare earths, which everybody likes to talk about these days, the total mined production of rare earths was about $5 billion in the entire world, which is very small. And the entire production of refined rare earths was $15 billion. And 90% of that refining happened in China. It's highly technical, it's very difficult, and they own the IP, and they're very, very, very good at it. if you want policy, and actually it's the biggest issue I see in this room, you have all these policies that are based on theories and taxation and mineral rents and all of these things. But I shouldn't be the only person in this room representing the industry that actually provides these things. Sorry. That pays the tax and that invests the money to build the mines and build the refineries that provide industry with the minerals they need. The policies that most people have gone for in the world, the US has the most advanced policy. It has the best data these days. It used to be BRGM, you are right. It no longer is. But they have the best system for assessing what global trade flows are in all minerals, including critical minerals, and what they need and what the criticality is to their country in terms of what happens if... So the most critical mineral in all of the US is one of the 17 rare earth elements. It's called samarium. The entire global market for samarium is $2 billion, of which about 30 million is imported into the US. If that got cut off from America, it would affect $4.5 billion in trade in things that they produce, the permanent magnets that have samarium that are essential to American industry. The problem with critical minerals is you have to design a policy that ensures trade flows for minerals that don't make any money. Most critical minerals, there are over 100 years of known rare earth reserves in the world. The reason we're not producing them is because they're uneconomic. You are working, if you want to develop mines and if you want to develop refining, you need to work with the industries, which are completely commercial, who are going to develop these industries, and you have to understand the economics of mining. And until you do that, you will not get any investment in it. The reason the Chinese are so good at this is because they invested $1 trillion over 25 years in mining and refining capacity, much of which is in China, much of which is elsewhere, and they are very, very good at it because they do it and they extract the maximum profits from it. If the world wants to design policies, any policies that you all want to design that are going to increase and profit from critical minerals need to understand the profitability and the economics of the mining industry itself, or else they will not be successful, in my opinion. It's a complicated industry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Maybe before we try to contact people online, Professor Sumata, do you want to intervene?
Good evening to everyone. I'll try my best to speak in English. Yeah? Basically, I'm a French-speaking person, if I can say. Okay? But I'll try my best to speak in English. Yeah, I've been asked to present something regarding critical materials and climate issue, but I'll focus on challenges and opportunity for developing countries, especially for DRC. The problem is about rich mineral country in Africa, like DRC or Zambia, is the system that's been set up since colonization and since the first years of independence of this country. They are trying to sell just raw material. They're not transforming, exploiting the local base and try to create more jobs. I think it's an opportunity for critical materials, as they have a huge quantity of these resources. I think it's the right time for them to try to reverse the curve or to try to set up like new policies, because at this stage they can contribute in climate issue as well. Okay, that's in fact to move the economic mining-based economies and try to set up more inclusive growth. I think it's time for this country, and they could just benefit from the boom of these raw materials. Okay, and DRC and Zambia, for instance, with their huge quantity of copper or cobalt mines. Yeah, how they can just try to set up like industry manufacturing lithium-ion batteries, and why not electric vehicles? I think at this stage they can be like key players in this energy and ecological transition. However, they must adopt appropriate strategy to capitalize on the mineral wealth. Indeed, this country must avoid past pitfalls: poor business climate, defective infrastructure, unattractive mining codes, ineffective taxation. In fact, they have to position themselves favorably upstream and downstream in the value chains of these products. I will go through the situation of this country over the past decades, okay? And we can see, for instance, since 2002, we observe a growth who has been, sustained in DRC, more than 3%. But this boom has not created enough job, because it's based on just extracting raw material and just selling it, like exporting it like that. Okay, and I think now if you look at critical materials, at this stage, if you look at the last figures, for instance, we can say that sub-Saharan Africa has the potential about 30% of world critical minerals, according to IMF, which is very important. Okay, so we see all those resources are concentrated in Central and Southern Africa. Okay, so we can see, for instance, DRC, which 74% of global production of cobalt at this stage, which is very huge. There are other countries as well, like Zambia, and you can see South Africa and Zimbabwe as well, okay? And what they should do in order to reverse the curve, first of all, they have to move away from this primary specialization of their economies, okay? And they have to set up also infrastructure. That's very, very important. Poor infrastructure is a huge problem in this country. And to set up, to improve the source of energy as well, okay? And the other point is about insufficient mobilization of tax revenues due to the decay of the tax system in force in most countries, okay? The other thing is the bad mining codes and plethora of tax incentive for investors. So I think in DRC, for instance, we can see mining grants amount to 6.3% of GDP, while tax revenue represent only 1.8% between 2010 and 2019, okay? So there are huge problem in this context. The other point is about tax evasion, with the leakage of financial revenue by large mining companies in most of the African country. And I think someone has been talking about, maybe it should be tomorrow, about informal sector or artisanal sector. I don't know, I saw it in the program. But the other point is just to mobilize enough resources regarding the artisanal sector. Yeah, because there's no taxation of this sector in DRC and in Zimbabwe, for instance. Okay. So what they should do in this context, they can also take advantage of ecological transition as well. If you think about the DRC, which is forest and all its resources, okay? And in this context, what they should do, maybe I try to develop like which energy transition, which should set up sustainable development, okay? And they should think about the transformation of resources, which is in the, what you call the goal 7 of the African continent agenda. They talk about trying to transform, their resources. They set up this policy. This is a target for the future, how to set up this policy, but it's still on their agenda as well. But they need to mobilize resources and to set up like a proper policy to improve their governance and fight against corruption, whatever they should do in this context. Okay, but there is which is a new thing today in DRC, in Zambia as well, that they are trying to set up like new policy to establish cooperation with this country in order to set up like batteries and electric vehicles. I think they should move further in this policy and try, to create jobs in this context, and it should be, in fact, good for this country. But there's still a long way. And there is also cooperation between the country, and in this project to establish, this cooperation, they have the help with China, can bring like support and resources, and the EU at some extent, which is good for this country because despite the resources they have, they still have a huge problem, in creating jobs, and people are living in main poverty. So maybe with this critical mineral, they could have the opportunity to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Professor Sumata. We have now online Thomas Melonio, the Chief Economist of the French Agency for Development. Thomas? C'est bon?
Vous m'entendez? Can you hear me?
OK, on t'entend.
Thank you. So I don't know if you can see my presentation already or not, but yes, it appears so. So first, let me start with thanking the...
Je ne sais pas si vous voyez ma présentation. Je voudrais remercier les organisateurs pour cette conférence très intéressante. Alors, j'ai quelques
Merci de m'avoir laissé
and comment on some of the earlier comments that were made by Minister Ibrahima Sarr on the one hand, also Carlo Rossotto and Amanda van Dyke as well. I'm going to mostly talk about what Europe and Africa can do together, and certainly what Minister Sarr said early on matters, meaning that critical minerals, they are critical, but depends to whom, depends to do what. And in that case, I think setting the objectives right is really meaningful for the conversation, because it's not the same. Amanda was talking about how some minerals might be critical to certain industries. If the objective is to keep industrial jobs in country A or B, it's not the same as typically in the case of Europe, identifying the minerals that are critical to maintain the energy sovereignty or the energy security on the continent. So I'm going to focus on and use that particular angle from a European perspective, meaning we are looking at critical minerals, but the criticality is really about the sovereignty and energy security of the continent in that case, but it might be different in other contexts. This is just a clarification point of view from my current position. So just to mention two recent publications at AFD. The one on the left here is on the mining potential of Africa, and the one on and that's by colleagues led by Julien Gourdon and Hugo Laperoni. And the one on the right hand is another paper, but in which we're dealing with a few colleagues of mine on how development agencies and development banks like AFD can play a role in the current situation, and in particular, since we have a climate problem and an industrial problem, how the development policy can try to mitigate that. Just now with a focus on Africa, just to indicate where mining rents currently are located. So this is, I'm not going to go into the details, but Sumata and Ibrahima have talked about it already. It's not like any country in Africa is a mining country. So just here we're reminding that there are countries in which we have a more mining activity. And also, I think it was said by Amanda earlier on, not all metals are critical, not all metals are precious, not all metals have equal economic value. So in the case of Africa currently, what you have in this box is the relative rate, economic rate of the various metals. Sorry, it's partly in French, but we observe that for example, the share of gold remains very, very high. It's not a critical mineral per se, but it's a huge source of revenues for a number of African countries. And behind the gold, we have platinum, diamonds, iron, and copper coming behind. Not all these minerals would be considered critical from a European perspective, for example, but this is just to remind that critical minerals are not necessarily heavyweights in terms of current economic situation. Now this graph shows the Africa's share. So in the case of continent where the continent has a high share, or let's say market share or potential market share, I name a few minerals, but it appears in that case that cobalt, for example, manganese, chrome, bauxite, and tantalum are the minerals for which there's and critical minerals for which there's the highest share on the African continent. Phosphate as well for fertilizers is very important. I think it's a different category. Ibrahima Sarr talked a little bit about fertilizers, but probably would not be seen as critical from a European perspective, even if it's a very significant mineral in terms of resources. The potential for Africa in lithium, rare earths, lanthanides is still to be explored. We assume it could be high. It's been BRGM has been referred to. Some minerals were very well identified in the past. There might be a need for further exploration, but this is just to identify the current situation. Now, maybe just a few remarks from a development perspective. I think it was Ibrahima who said that maybe what's critical for European perspective is not critical for Senegal, because what would be critical is the resources that can generate either jobs or fiscal resources. This is just a reminder that the number of jobs in African mining is not precisely hard. Sometimes you hear Africa is the continent of resources, of mining. It's actually false vision. It's not like there are zero jobs. It's significant, but it's not huge. And in particular, formal jobs are not that many. I think it was Sumata who talked about artisanal or informal jobs. And we can see that in a number of countries, indeed, artisanal or informal jobs are way more numerous than formal jobs. So on the right-hand lower part here, you have the number of artisanal versus industrial jobs. And in the case of DRC, as Sumata was talking about, we can see that informal jobs are way more numerous. Still, it's not a huge number, even in the case of a country with a very high potential. But this is the number, and I think it matters because it means that no country could really fully rely, except maybe Botswana or Mauritania, but should not rely too much on mining for only from a jobs perspective. It means it has to be a combination of jobs, public recipes, and number of other unrelated jobs, but again, even indirect jobs will not be or will not have will not constitute a majority of jobs in the country. So again, very significant sectors in certain countries, but as a development strategy, diversification is very, very important. Now, one geopolitical comment on that graph, and that's from a paper by colleagues Hugo Laperoni, Etienne Span, and Semenyuk, the mistake on the date there, but it's just to illustrate the number of trade barriers that have been increasing in the past. And I think it was Carlo who talked about a little bit the relationship between trade and critical minerals. So what we're seeing is the number of trade barriers increase quite rapidly, and this is also sort of an indication of the risk associated with global value chains, meaning that could be value chains either controlled by China, the US, Europe, working in silos. I think we are not there yet at all, but it's a potential risk that value chains would be cut severely by trade barriers, which then would pose a sovereignty risk or an economic risk for the most important zone. So that's one way to look at the geopolitical risk associated with critical minerals. Just, I don't know to what extent you'll be able to read that diagram, but again, that's also from my colleague Espagne, Laperoni, and Semenyuk. This is looking at production, concentration of production. What you're seeing here, I don't know if you can read that precisely, but Amanda talked about lanthanide and rare earths. You can see the share of China in production for rare earths and lanthanide in particular. For cobalt, entirely different concentration. That would be DRC, the main country of production. Lithium, you have the share of Australia or Chile in that case. Again, this is one way to look at risk from a production perspective. My colleagues also looked at a different perspective, which is the ownership of the mines or the operation of the mines. And in that case, you're seeing the way more important role of China here in red. That's another measure of concentration. A last one, which is also provided by the paper, is to look at the equity concentration in mining. And in that case, again, entirely different perspective, the USA having a much bigger market share in the equity concentration by critical mineral. So here you have it by category, and you're seeing, I think it was Amanda again that was talking about it, but how in the very specific case of lanthanide and associated minerals, the share of China is bigger, not only for refining, but for the equity ownership of these minerals. So why I'm putting this figure on the table? Because if we want to look at criticality of minerals and where the underlying risks are, it depends on your perspective. So it could be on the equity concentration, in which case the recommendation, for example, in Europe would be to invest more in equity in companies that actually run mining. It's not necessarily running the mining per se, it could be the equity that matters. But again, it depends on which minerals you consider critical. This is just to refer to a paper I co-authored on which are the vulnerabilities in Europe relative to cloud, active principle in medicine, rare earths, semiconductors, LNG, weapons. This is just to illustrate that Europe is quite dependent on imports for semiconductors and rare earths, which means that there is vulnerability there. Okay, so maybe my last point is when we assess or estimate that there are vulnerabilities, it can be for industrial jobs, but they are not that numerous currently in the case of Europe. So it's rather a missed potential in batteries, EVs, semiconductors. But I think the risks are higher than that because in the case, if you could imagine that global value chains could be severely cut on certain critical minerals, then we might have an energy problem, which is a bigger concern. So it's not just about missed opportunities, it's also about risk that could be carried all across industrial sectors if we were too limited in energy. So one answer to risk is, in my opinion, is really to diversify. So meaning you need a diversification in your sources of critical minerals, also diversify in technology. there is more than one technology for batteries. We have been probably overexposed in certain technology in Europe, mostly manganese, cobalt. This is the technology, sorry, it's NMC, but I'm not sure it's the equivalent in English, as opposed to LFP, again, lithium, iron, and phosphate, probably a different acronym in English. But diversifying in technology is a way to be less dependent on certain critical minerals. And I expect a diversification in technology. So again, from a European perspective, we should diversify not only the countries with which we have partnerships, but also internally the technologies which we have in our industrial sector, so that we don't rely too much on certain minerals. And often we are, led to think diversification in technology, in minerals, but also diversification in time. The time at which you invest is very critical. If you invest too early in a technology and you fail, it's going to be a disaster. So we've seen battery producers, for example, go bankrupt because they arrived too early. That already happened. So diversifying in time, meaning investing in equity or debt through development banks, not everything everywhere all at once, but diversifying in time also, I think, will be very important. And maybe a last message is that I'm not sure we have done enough jobs to quantify demand or to quantify risk associated with evolution of demand in time at the European level. So if we want to invest properly, we need to do a little bit more of that. And last but not least, as opposed to other continents, our capacity to invest in equity or through big banks has been underwhelming so far. So we would need to associate financial institutions like AFD, but also others, to manage this risk, and these sovereignty issues, which, frankly speaking, wasn't our mission in the past. We are a development bank, so our historic mandate is the development of partner countries, but we're seeing here that being active in global value chains is becoming a new mission because we have existing and strategic systemic risk in Europe. So with European Investment Bank and others, we're really considering this partnership, a cooperation between Europe and in particular Africa, with which I'm talking today, but as a new mission that we'll have to take over time. But again, this is really pretty much in the current debate. We know that the European Union will discuss a new budget and new mission starting 2028 and later. And this is really, again, a prospective thought and not necessarily a formal message that I wanted to convey. Thank you so much.
Okay. If I could just summarize, because this was supposed to be a panel on policy, and I can summarize, there's actually a really easy way to put this out in terms of policies that work for mining. The most successful mining and refining complex for critical minerals on the planet belongs to China. And China has one of the best industrial policies in the world when it comes to developing their own critical minerals. They've created the best industry in the world because of industrial policy. Their policy is the policy we should all be mimicking in terms of developing a critical minerals policy. The first thing they did was measure, policy one, measure what do we need to keep our industry strong? What minerals are critical to keeping Chinese? They have to measure what do we have and what do we need for our industry. The second thing is develop your own local mining and refining capacity. And that's the first thing China did. They developed everything they could as in their own country. Then they developed mining, and then the next step was developing and investing in mining and refining elsewhere. But the first thing they did was develop mining and refining at home. Then they developed mining and refining equity investments, equity and debt investments elsewhere. And last but not least, they developed a very strong, at the same time as developing their own mining industry, they also have the world's strongest recycling industry. They recycle very, very effectively. And last but not least, they stockpiled. America has recently come out and basically mimicked this immediately. They basically have the same policy. They've realized they need to reshore, and they're doing all the same things: domestic mining investment, domestic refining investment, domestic stockpiling, and domestic recycling. Then make friends with the rest of the world and figure out how to get it elsewhere. But you can't have those are the policies that China followed, now America's following, and eventually Europe will get around to following as well, which is just about the only way you can develop your own critical minerals capacity. So I realize that's extremely basic, but those are the policies. That is the policy track that gets critical mineral sovereignty.
Thank you, Gisela. Sorry, Amanda. We still have someone online that we have to listen. It's Gisela Granado, the policy director of the EITI. Gisela?
I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, we hear you and we see your slides. Thank you.
Great. So maybe just to note that I am with the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. And what we do, we have two main aspects of our work. One is data, and the other one is multi-stakeholder dialogue. And one of the panelists mentioned the importance of having companies in this discussion. I'm not from academia myself, but on our board, we have companies like Rio Tinto, BHP, Trafigura, a commodity trader, as well as Vale represented. So that public-private partnership is very important in our model. Now we have EIT implementing countries. I won't go into any of the details because I think other panelists have covered this, but just to note that we deal with governments and mainly producing governments. I just want to highlight something that the panelist from Senegal said, that industrial policy, you can't take it in isolation. You need information on the cadaster. You need information on the social and environmental considerations. So what we consider important to inform industrial policy is data along the entire upstream value chain. And that includes production data, revenue data, lots of other data. And I've just pulled something from our website. This is Indonesia's taxation based on GFS, based on the IMF classification of taxes. And just to say that analysis of this data, time series data, panel data, not just Indonesia, but looking at Indonesia, Philippines, and Chile, for example, is important in forming your policies. So just wanted to highlight the importance of transparency, accountability, and dialogue in informing industrial policy. Now, we see a number of countries that are fiscally dependent on the minerals and the extractive sector. We have 55 countries that have signed up for our initiative, including Senegal and the DRC. And of those, 34 are classified as resource dependent. And we're also seeing some trends in the extractive industries. We are seeing tariffs that are affecting producers of critical minerals. We're also seeing international aid decreases. All of this just puts a lot more pressure on the extractive industries in our operating countries. And we are also seeing these countries experiencing sovereign debt crises, like in Ghana and Zambia. Now, I just want to make the case for transparency. I went to Côte d'Ivoire in 2021, and there the tax authorities did not have access to the contracts on the extractive sector. So how can you effectively deploy taxation policies if you don't have access to the contracts? So I just want to say very basic. Beyond that, we need to have conversations about why companies have paid what they paid, have they paid the correct amounts, and in the countries like the Philippines and Argentina, licenses are not allocated at the national level. They are allocated at the subnational level. So what about the subnational transfers? What are the systems in place at the subnational level? What are the policies in place at the subnational level? I won't go into all of this, but of course, there are lots of linkages to local content, employment, etc. And I want to pull some examples, and I want to pull here from the DRC. And here we had, as the panelists mentioned, 74% of the world's cobalt is produced in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And there was a partnership between the DRC government and Chinese companies to produce infrastructure in exchange for minerals. And my point here is to look beyond taxation, also consider what state-owned enterprises are investing, because that can link back to debt, but also look at the infrastructure agreements that are being signed in these countries. And that also has implications for policies, etc. Basically, they were supposed to produce certain infrastructure and they weren't. Studies and investigations led to them recovering or renegotiating deal to get more than 4 billion extra in additional revenues linked to infrastructure in exchange for minerals. I also want to just draw an example from Zambia. Zambia has struggled for a number of years with a lot of regime changes in terms of taxation policy, industrial policy, and that is problematic for the companies that operate in the sector. So maybe just to note the role of the EITI in terms of supporting analysis before a new industrial policy or tax policy is introduced so that we can have data-based reforms. Just in terms of the risk, we have Burkina Faso, which is a gold producer, which neighbors Togo, which is not a gold producer, but a gold exporter. So we have a lot of countries that are dealing with illicit financial flows, porous borders. So Burkina Faso has done a study to understand the impact of these illicit financial flows on their revenues and in terms of the policies that they adopt. I won't go into all of this, and I will stop sharing here. And this was very brief because I know you're tired of presentations, but maybe just to share a couple of examples from Latin America and the Caribbean. So Chile has been very successful in value addition in copper. It will not be as successful in lithium unless, because lithium, it expires, the product becomes less good after 6 months. It will not develop its lithium industry if it does not have cross-border or cross-national arrangements with car manufacturers in Mexico, for example. So value addition is important, but there are risks associated with value addition that and country context need to be taken into consideration. Bolivia, they tried to produce batteries based on their lithium industry. They had Chinese factories built, but there was no transfer skills to the local persons. So it basically did not work. So while there are basic tenets to value addition, there are risks that countries need to consider. And all of that, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of transparency in those conversations. I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gisela. So, 5-10 minutes, or do we finish now? No question?
No, we can take at least 5 minutes.
Two questions? Two questions.
And I think you have to also say the word on the mic for people online saying that we're really short on time, so we won't.
So, yeah, we are really short on time. I repeat just after you. For the people online, so we won't be able to take any question online, but we can take 1 or 2 questions here in the room. No question? 1 times? 2 times? No? It's a long day. Okay, no question? Okay. Didn't see.
Another question, probably some comments, but I will anyway give my presentation tomorrow morning. I will give a more comprehensive framework for China's critical minerals policy. But just a little bit, so I want to just add some few sentences for China's critical, why it is very successful, except you just mentioned some points. I also want to add is that like regional integration and technological upgrading is also very important because China connects the resource abundant regions, for example, Inner Mongolia, with Jiangsu and Shanghai, this place which is very good for EV cars. So they build the clusters for integration, so which will also good for the economic unbalance because they want to improve the economic development for those resource abundant regions. So that's another very important point. The last point I want to add is also the financial instrument, because China also has RMB international. So that's why they also want they build the currency platform, which is they have green bonds, for example, such kind of financial tool to help those industries to be more sustainable and green. Also, this kind of platforms will be also used in international trading for critical minerals, which is also important for the RMB internationalism in the future. So anyway, I will talk about more details tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.